Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we'll be explaining my full Toyota 3.4 swap from the full beginning to the ending. I made a PDF sheet here that has a 3.4 swap guide specifically made for my vehicle and my setup. So if you guys want to download this, in the video description, you guys can download this and follow along as I go through this video. We'll be discussing the swap on my truck here. My truck is a 93 V6 3.0 IFS. Our donor vehicle is a 97 4Runner 5-speed manual to manual transmission. It makes it really easy, so really easy to set up. For anyone that's doing a swap that has a 22RE or any other engines, the mounts will be a little bit more different, so you guys will have to do your own research on that. So let's go ahead and get started on this video. Getting your donor vehicle. Option 1, you can buy the engine separately and then buy all the pieces that you need to go with it as far as the CAT, crossover, ECU, wire harness, and hopefully everything's there when you buy it. Option 2 is what I went with. I bought the whole rig. You can buy the whole rig, whether it's an auction vehicle, whether it's been rolled over, crash. For me, I bought the auction rig, and thankfully the vehicle was running when I bought it, or at least I got it to run, so I was able to just test drive and make sure the motor works good. There's lots of reasons why you want to do this, because if you do this, you can also part out the rest of the vehicle and make some money back to help fund the project. And the other thing is that if you have the whole rig, it gives you the chance to pull the motor. So this gives you a good idea of how the 3.0 comes out and also where things goes together. So this really helps you in the long run. I highly recommend you guys go with option 2. Parts that you'll be needing off your donor vehicle is the OBD2 wire. Make sure you cut about 6 inches of pigtail off of it. And then on the passenger side kick panel by the ECU, obviously you need the ECU. And then you also need the big electrical plug that's right next to it. You can't miss that out because it's like a big latch plug. There's also a small one that's attached to it. And then also there's one ECU wire that's built into the dash harness. For my ECU, I have 4 plugs. 1 is from the dash, and then 3 of them is attached to the engine harness. So make sure you get all of that because you'll be needing those to do your wire conversion. Other things you'll need is just basically everything that's attached to the engines, the MAF, the catalytic converter, the fan. Just keep all that stuff because in the EVAP box, you'll be needing all that stuff for your swap as well. So just make sure you hang on to that stuff. You also want to keep the O2 sensor. Keep both of the O2 sensor and the flange after the cat converter. Things that you want to keep on the 3.0 is the oil pan and the oil pickup tube. The dipstick is optional. The engine mounts is a must. You want to use the engine mounts on the 3.4 to mount this to your truck or your vehicle that's getting swapped. The radiator, you're keeping the radiator off the 3.0. The radiator shroud from the 3.0, you can use that. I don't run the fan shroud. And also the fan, you can just keep that for spare. If you don't plan to keep the 3.0 engine anymore, you don't care about the engine harness, you can go ahead and cut the engine harness on the 3.0 right at the power steering, and then you want to keep everything on from there to the ECU and also the wire that goes down to the transmission. You'll be using the reverse and the 4x4 switch off the 3.0. That would tap into the 3.4 engine harness, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. You also want to keep the 3.0 rubber grommet, which is right here. You'll be using that for the 3.4 engine harness that goes back into the firewall, keeps it waterproof and seal proof. But you also want to keep the top plate on the 3.0 AC that will transfer onto your 3.4 AC compressor. We'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later on. And you also want to keep the power steering banjo bolt off the 3.0. That will be used for the 3.4 power steering. Some of the first thing to do first is wash the 3.4 engine if you can. Make sure it's nice and clean. It's much more easier to work on a clean engine, degrease it, get it on the engine stand, and just clean that stuff out. And also, if the 3.4 engine still starts before you tear it apart, try to go ahead and bump start the crank bolt. I had a very bad issue with my crank bolt. It was really hard, really stubborn, so I would recommend you guys do the bump start method to break that loose. For the engine wire harness, I went with the toy only swap wire harness adapter. Runs about $400 for my setup. They do have a $75 quarter charge if you don't send in your donor plugs. They did charge me the $75 quarter charge because I didn't send the donor plugs off the 3.0. I'm just gonna go ahead and forget about it because I pretty much used it, and I also gave them the wire harness with the engine to the new to my customer that bought the engine. If you guys don't know how to do the wire harness setup, I highly recommend you guys go with Toy Only Swap or one of those company, and that's the first thing you should do is send in the plugs and have them start working on it, because the turnaround time's 5 to 8 weeks. So while they're doing that, you can go ahead and get prepped up on the engine and get it ready for the swap. Doing a swap for a 5-speed to 5-speed is very, very easy, especially your 3.4 is a 5-speed. But I know a lot of folks don't have a 3.4 5-speed. A lot of folks find 3.4 automatic. So if you're doing an automatic 3.4 into a 5-speed 3.0, you might want to do a little bit of research on that, because I believe the wiring is a bit different. And also I heard that you have to get a manual 3.4 ECU, which is kind of hard to find nowadays because it is kind of like a unicorn. So if that is your case, make sure you do a little bit of research on that. I was thankfully lucky enough to find a 3.4 5-speed, and it went from manual to manual, so it makes it really, really easy, straight up plug and play. Next thing on our list is called tune-up. While this engine is out, you might as well give it a tune-up, replace some of the parts. And some of these parts you don't have to if you don't want to, but these are some of the things that I replace. Head gasket, it's optional. If you want to do the head gasket, you might as well do it while the engine's out. I didn't do the head gasket on my part, even though I had 300,000 miles on the engine. I'm just gonna run with it. Next thing is the 2 knock sensors. You can decide if you want to replace those or not. You have 2 of them. They're pretty expensive, like 250 bucks each. I didn't replace my knock sensor because, like I said, I drove this vehicle for about 400 miles. It was running great. I do recommend you guys replace the knock sensor wire harness. It is a must, because after years and years between located between the 2 cylinder heads, it gets really brittle, and when you take it off, it just basically falls apart. So highly recommend you guys replace that. Cost like 40 bucks for the Toyota OEM knock sensor wire. Next thing is to replace all the intake gasket, all the intake manifold gasket. You're gonna be taking it down, so might as well put new gasket on it. While the intake manifolds are off, I highly recommend you guys degrease them, the outside and also the inside. They're probably nice and greasy, so I like to use super clean degreaser, and then I like to use pressure wash on them. Fuel injector is a good thing to clean while you have them out. You can go ahead and clean the fuel injector. Shout out to Injector Masters. I sent them in. They help sponsor the injector cleaners. So I sent it out and they help clean it. If you're not going to clean the fuel injector, at least take them out, clean them a little bit with brake cleaner, and also replace the gas or the rubber seals and the rubber O-rings on the fuel injector so they don't have any leaks. So I highly recommend you guys do that. This is the IAC, and I highly recommend you guys unopen that and clean it, spray it down. It gets really greasy, so make sure you guys clean that and also replace the IAC gasket. PCV valve is always good to replace. It's nice and cheap, so make sure you go ahead and replace the PCV valve. It is optional if you don't want to. And also the hose that connects the PVC to the intake, usually that's pretty hard and brittle, so I went ahead and replaced that as well. The other things you want to check is just all your rubber hoses. Anything that's rubber hoses, just go ahead and check them out. Make sure they're not cracked or brittle. If they are, just go ahead and replace them. Also a good time to go ahead and replace your spark plugs. You have 6 of them. I recommend you guys use Denso, and even on the stickers here, it says that it's a special one. Then use 2 dual prong, not this typical 1 prong. The one that you want to go with is the Denso, and the part number for that is K16TR11. While you're there, go ahead and replace your spark plugs wires too. These are the NGK. The NGK spark plugs is NGK 4412RC TE66. If you remove your spark plug wires and you forget which cylinder goes to which cylinder, here's the cylinder pattern. On your passenger side, you have odds number 135. On your driver's side, you have 246. The spark plug pattern is cylinder 1, 4, 3, 6, 5, 2. So make sure you guys keep that in mind if you forget which wires go to which cylinder. I don't know how to confirm if the coil packs are good, but obviously you want to make sure your coil packs are good. Thankfully, I was able to drive this engine, or the donor engine, the 4Runner, before I parted out. So just make sure your coil plugs are good. While you have the valve covers open, it's also a good time to check the valve clearance. It's a little bit more complicated than the 22RE, but once you read on how to do it, it gets pretty easy. So make sure you check your valve clearance while you're at it. After you're done with the valve clearance, you can go ahead and close up the valve cover. I highly recommend you guys pressure wash it, degrease it, replace all the gaskets, and also replace the grommets for the screws, and replace the spark plug tube gaskets. It's also a good time to do the main important thing, which is the timing belt overhaul. Highly recommend you guys buy the full timing belt kit overhaul, and that includes the timing belt, all the bearings, the water pump, and also the tensioner. And just go ahead and get that replaced and get that all cleaned up and get it tackled with. While you're in there, go ahead and also make sure to replace the thermostat. If you don't know when the thermostat was changed, just go ahead and replace the thermostat. You can go with Toyota, or you can just go with one that's a fail-safe from the auto parts stores. Also, while you're in there, check the fan bracket pulley. The fan bracket pulley, they call it the fake water pump. It looks like a water pump, but it's not. It's just a cover for it. Just go ahead and spin it, and if it seems wobbly or just kind of loose or noisy, go ahead and replace that. It's like $100 on Amazon. The part number for that is the ASIN part number, and that's FBT004004. While you're also in there doing the timing belt, make sure you go ahead and replace the front and the rear main seal and also the cam seals. The crank pulley bolt is the main crank pulley bolt. It's the big one, 19 millimeter. That Toyota calls that. It's a one-time use, so you can decide for yourself if you want to go ahead and replace it or reuse it. I went ahead and buy a new one. It costs like $10, so make sure you guys replace that. Also a good time to just go ahead and get a new air filter while you're in there. You also want to go ahead and replace all your 3 belts, the power steering, the AC, and also the alternator belt. The power steering is the longest one. The alternator is the second one, that's the longest, and then the AC belt is the smallest one. So if you get lost in each order, just go off of that. I went ahead and bought the 3 belts as a kit from eBay. They sold as a kit. It was like $30 or so, so really good deal. You're gonna have to go ahead and replace your exhaust manifold gasket. You might as well do it. While you're doing that, you might break some studs and some nuts, so make sure you replace the manifold gasket. I went with the Renflex 7007. Replace any broken studs from the exhaust manifold, and you also need brand new exhaust nuts. These nuts are one-time use, so make sure you get them. You need 21 of them total for the exhaust manifold, the crossover, and also down to the 2-to-1 downpipe. I got the nuts, the Toyota OEM nuts off eBay, which was the cheapest price that I found it, and it was a good deal. If you're a manual transmission, you might as well go ahead and replace the clutch. We'll go ahead and talk about the clutch later on in the video. You'll need new exhaust gasket for the manifold and also the downpipe and the cat, so make sure you guys get those. I'll put part numbers on the list. You'll also need the O2 sensor mount on the exhaust. You're most likely gonna have to weld a new one for the second O2 sensor, so make sure you guys get that. I got the kit from Yoda Shop, really cheap and affordable. Another part that I needed was the oil dipstick union. We had to relocate the oil dipstick, and we'll talk about that later. But for the part number for that is Toyota part number 90405-10033. I bought it on Amazon. It cost like $8. I also ordered a new dipstick, the correct dipstick, and we'll also go ahead and talk about that later on. But I ordered it from Toy Only Swap. It cost like $60 or $70. I don't remember. The next thing we're going to discuss is the mounting. So the mounting for this is that the 3.4 mounts directly to the 3.0, the bell housing V6. You have to use the 3.0 engine mount, or else the 3.4 is going to be too tall. So make sure you save your 3.0 engine mount because you'll be using that. You can also use the 2 bottom bracket from the 3.0. You don't have to, but it's nice. It helps hold the bottom of the bell housing, and also just connects the hold that bottom dust shield. I highly recommend you guys use swivel socket, the 17 mil and the 14 mil. They really helped me on this project here, so pick some of those up. You have 6 main bolts for the bell housing. There's 17 mil, and then everything else is all the 14 mil and the 2 starter bolts. Next thing on our list is the plumbing and the cooling. We went ahead and used the 3.0 hoses for all the heater hose. It fit directly onto the 3.4. We went and kept the 3.0 radiator. We kept the 3.0 coolant bottle and also kept it at the same location. We went and used the 3.4 fan clutch, and we used the 3.0 fan. You can use either one, whether it's the 3.4 or 3.0 fan clutch. I believe the 3.4 fan is too big for the fan shroud if you're using the 3.0 fan shroud. I'm not running a fan shroud because I never had one, or the one I have broke, and I've been running it for 10. When I had the 3.0, I was running without no fan shroud, so never had any heating or cooling issue. The top radiator hose, you'll be using the stock the stock 3.4 hose. I went ahead and bought a new one from Napa. Part number for that is 8249. The bottom hose is from Napa as well, and it's part number 8453. It's a direct fitment. You don't have to cut nothing, so I highly recommend you guys get that. Direct fitment, no need to cut, no need to modify anything. And I also just decided to go ahead and use the proper coolant, so I went with the Xerac Asian coolant. It's a red bottle, but when you pour it out, it comes out pink. So I highly recommend you guys use the correct coolant. Some folks didn't use the green coolant and they say that works fine, but I'm just gonna go ahead with the proper coolant, the red Asian coolant or the Toyota pink coolant, red coolant. You need about 2 gallons of it for this engine, so I highly recommend you guys buy about 3 gallons. Just keep 1 gallon for spare. Next thing on our list is the oil pan and the oil dipstick. There is no modification needed for the 3.4 baffle. You'll be using the 3.4 baffle. You will use the 3.0 oil pan and the 3.0 pickup tube. On the pickup tube, you do have to cut one of the legs off, and this is for IFS only. For a solid axle swap, your oil pan will be slightly different. For the dipstick, you can use the 3.0 dipstick, but you do have to do some modification. I believe that was cutting to the heat shield. I went ahead and bought the proper dipstick for $60 off of Toyota Toy Only Swap, and it fit directly bolt in. Make sure you don't install the dipstick yet until you have your engine the engine mount on, because the dipstick goes inside or in between the engine mount on the driver's side. The dipstick also has to be relocated from the front to the slight middle. Any 3.4 motor that's older than 99, the hole is already pre-drilled in there. It's just been plugged up with the metal thingy. So you want to go ahead and tap that out while the oil pan is removed from the inside of the block. And for any 3.4 that's 2000 or newer, you have to drill a new dipstick hole, and they do make a template for that. So just look and see which motor you have. And then for the original hole in the front here, we went ahead and plugged that up with the M12 bolt. I think we went with the M12 1.5, and you do have to tap it, so it's really easy. I made a full video about that. Go ahead and plug that up with just this bolt, and then also put some RTV for the threads so you can seal that really nice and good. For the oil pan, I highly recommend you guys use Permatex RTV, the black RTV that's made for high temp and grease. I use that as for all my oil pan gasket. It has worked great in the past. I would avoid any paper or any cork gasket. Fuse system. For the fuse system, we went ahead and used the 3.4 fuse line. This right here is a 3.4 fuse line. Originally, it goes on the driver's side. So what we do is we just unloosen the banjo bolt and then flip it over, and then it comes down and bolts right into the 3.0 hard line. So really easy to do, no modification needed for that. On the fuel pressure regulator, which is right here, this line here, you have a return line, and you can just flip that around, and then this goes into your hard line right here, your hard line for the return line. Really easy to do. And then also on that fuel pressure regulator, there's a vapor line, which is this line here. It originally goes into the box that goes right here. So since we did the ISR mod, we just go ahead and put that line right back into the intake right here. Really easy to do. Let's talk about electrical. So this is a big thing for a lot of folks. The main thing we're going to talk about the wire harness that you need. So like I said in my earlier video, you can go ahead and make your own wire harness if you're good with electrical, or you can just order one. I don't know anything about the electrical wire harness, so don't ask me a question on that. I went with the toy only swap adapter. The toy only swap adapter includes one of the ECU, 2 plugs that goes into the dashboard into the 3.0. And then the big block one, and then also has the starter trigger, so don't worry about the starter trigger wire. And then also has the speed sensor plug that goes into your T case. The 3.4 ECU fits directly onto the inside of the passenger kick panel. The 3.4 ECU does have 2 legs that originally mounts to the wall, and those are screwed into the ECU, and you just have to remove those 2 legs out. Really simple. Right here is the starter trigger wire from the adapter from Toy Only Swap. It goes through the firewall and then into your starter. For the speed sensor plug, it goes under your floorboard, and there's a hole right here with the rubber grommet. Just go ahead and cut that rubber grommet in half, or slit the middle of it and slide it in, and that goes right into your floorboard onto your T case right there. For the positive and the negative wire, you'll be using the 3.4 positive and negative wire. Negative directly bolts from here to the block for negative. For your positive wire on your 3.4, go ahead and open that up and strip out the wires and keep only the big one, and then use the plastic guide that goes from there to the starter. You won't need any other wires from this big wire, that your big 3.4 wire, so you just keep the positive wire. Don't worry about the starter trigger, because like I said, we already have one from the adapter. Originally, you also have one wire that comes from the 80 amp plug that comes right here and goes into your positive wire. So what you can do is you can extend that wire from here and run it back to the battery, or what you can do is you can open up the fuse box, remove it, and then get one of the wire from Toy Only Swap. I decided to buy one, or you can make yourself one. But what you can do is you can just run another wire from here and then run it straight down to the starter, and it serves the same purpose. So instead of running from all the way to the front to the battery, you can run it straight from here down to the starter. I ordered mine from Toy Only Swap, and it's like a typical 8-gauge wire. I paid about 30 bucks for it, but in my opinion, it's worth it because I didn't want to deal with any crimping and any building wires. So you can make yourself one, or you can just order one yourself. But it's really easy to open up the fuse box. Don't get scared. Unscrew it open, and then there's some tabs for the bottom door, and that pops off really easy, and you can see the wires for the 80 amp. Another thing you have to do is that if you do have a tack, you have to add a 10,000K resistor to the back of the tack. You have to solder that in place. A lot of people are really scared to tackle this, but it's really easy to do. You just have to pop some of these thing open. You don't have to remove this main thing, but just remove this piece, and some piece down here. And then the cluster is held by 4 screw. Just unscrew that, pull the cluster out, and then unscrew the plugs in the back, and then you can have access to the tack. So that's really easy to do. Once you get that out, you can just solder the resistor yourself, or if you don't know how to solder, you can just take it to any electrical parts store, and I'm pretty sure they can do that for you. But the resistor is really cheap, a couple bucks online, eBay, whatever. 10,000K resistor, and solder that to the back in order to make your tack work. If you don't do that, you won't have a working tack. The 4x4 switch and the reverse switch has to be cut from the 3.0 and wired into the 3.4. So make sure you guys do that. On the bottom of your tranny, once you go down, you'll see a round one. That's your reverse. And then the one that's in the middle, which is like a small rectangular one, that's your 4x4. That will get tapped into your 3.4 wire harness. One thing I made a mistake was that when I was cutting those two switches, the plugs, I cut them with about 6 inches of pigtail. So don't do that, because you need about almost 2 feet of pigtails, because the 3.4 wire is pretty short and it reaches from here only, and it doesn't have enough room to come over into this side. So make sure when you guys tear the 3.0 wire harness apart, cut like 2 feet of pigtails, and then after you measure it, you can decide how many lengths you need. So that's really easy to do. Don't hesitate on doing that. And also, when you're splicing the reverse and the 4x4 switch wire, the wires are really easy. I'll go ahead and put a photo, but then once you see the wires, they're almost similar in colors, like green or white. So they're really similar. There's only 2 wires per switches, so you can't really mess them up. So don't hesitate. Hook them up, tape them up, and put some cable protector on them, and then plug them in, and you'll be golden. That shiny piece right there is the oil cooler delete, and that's optional. You can decide if you want to do the oil cooler delete or not. I decided to do it just to get rid of some stuff right there. So those are some of the accessories you can do. So for accessories, I did the oil cooler delete. Some other accessories you can do while you're at it is if you want to do cold air intake, that's optional. You can decide if you want to powder coat the valve covers, that's optional. If you want to go ahead and spray paint or powder coat the intake manifold, that's optional as well. Next thing on our list is emission and the vacuum line / e-box. So originally when I had the 3.0, I went ahead and deleted the charcoal canister already, and also I went ahead and delete my ADD system for the front diff actuator. I highly recommend you guys do that. It makes it more simple, and we'll go ahead and go over that. So you want to go ahead and use the 3.4 EVAP box. For now, I have the EVAP box just zip tied because I want to delete this in the future, but this is what it goes to. I'll go ahead and give you guys some details on the EVAP box. So this is just the empty line. This first line here goes into the intake tube. All of these plugs are pretty self-explanatory, so really easy to see. You can't really mess them up. This one on top here goes from here and back over here. The only one that I don't have plugged up right now is this one here. If you guys can see it, there's this one here, and this is the fuel tank line. So usually this goes from here to my fuel tank. So this is just a fuel tank breather, the vapor line they call it, and I believe this hard line is what it comes from the fuel tank, and this is basically just a vapor. What I did originally, I did this before the 3.0. When I had the 3.0, I just bring this line down here and I just let the vapor come out. So if I want to do it right, I guess I can run this line and get a longer line and run it back to the EVAP box. But for now, I haven't had any issues, so that's my setup for the EVAP box. So really easy to do. And this little metal piece right here, I just used a metal sheet screw and just tap it right into here, and that holds it really nice and sturdy. So that's the EVAP box right there for you guys. Next thing we have is the brake booster. So from the brake booster, you have a check valve. This check valve is from the 3.0, and originally this tube here runs along here and all the way to the 3.0 intake. So you can just cut the tube and just make it to length. So this right here goes to the check valve and then goes right here. Keep in mind that this check valve has a particular orientation, so it has to go one particular way. So when you remove it, just check it out. And if you do mess up installing this, what's going to happen is when you turn on your vehicle and you press the brake, it's going to be really hard. And if that happens, just go ahead and flip it around. I believe this check valve is for when they say that when your engine is off, or if you stall or something on a hill, this allows you to still press the brake and help your brake engages. So make sure you have this turned down properly. So you can use the hoses from the 3.0 and just cut that to length and bend that correctly and just do that. So that's really easy, nothing crazy for the check valve. The next thing is the crossover. We go ahead and use the 3.4 crossover. The 3.4 originally dumps onto the passenger side. You want to go and cut it and convert it and make it dump to the driver's side. So have somebody fabricate that up for you, or you can do it yourself. You're pretty good at that. So make sure you guys do that. The other option, if you want to run headers, then you can run aftermarket headers. The 2-to-1 pipe has a little tab right here, a little tab that comes out. Go ahead and just grind that off. So you'll use the 2-to-1 pipe, and you'll also use the 3.4. You'll be using the 3.4 Cadillac converter and this flange right here, and then everything else is going to be brand new for the exhaust system. So make sure you guys keep that system. For the AC system, you go and use the 3.4 AC compressor, and then you use the 3.0 top plate for the AC, and then we use the same 3.0 AC line. Make sure that when you guys open it up, be careful because all that Freon will come out. And then also just go ahead and fill up your AC line. I haven't done it yet, but I will eventually do it. Really easy to do for the AC compressor. For the power steering, we use the 3.4 power steering, same bracket, nothing modification needed. When you use the 3.4 power steering, you will be using the 3.0 hardline and also the 3.0 bolt. The 3.4 bolt is much longer, so you have to use the 3.0 hardline. At the end of the hardline of the bolt here, there's a little tab as well. Go ahead and cut that tab off, and then your the bolt will line up with the 3.4 power steering. You have to tighten that bolt really good. When I started the vehicle, I was getting power steering leak, and I thought that I had a bad power steering, but then I ended up using my breaker bar and tightening that bolt. I did a little bit of research, and that banjo bolt is like 80 foot-pound or something like that. So make sure you tighten that bolt really nice and snug. You guys all know how hard it is when we remove that bolt. It's super hard, so that's the reason why. Make sure that bolt is nice and if you have cruise control like me, I went ahead and removed my cruise control for now. In the future, I would go ahead and decide what I want to do with it. The cruise control just unplugs, and it's really easy, so it's not crazy. So it's just unplug, and the two plugs are hidden in the back right under the master cylinder. So I went ahead and removed my cruise control for now. I'll update you guys if I ever do decide to install that back on. For the throttle cable, we use the 3.0 throttle cable, and it just fits directly. The only thing you have to do is that this plate here is from the 3.4. You have to bend this plate. Originally, it sits about almost like a 90 degree right here. So you want to go ahead and hammer and bend this back because of the angle and the length of the wire. And then also this bracket here, you can see right here, it usually sits on top or threads from the top and then goes down, and you can see that it's been dinging up my roof here. So what I did is I put the bracket from the bottom and screw it from the bottom up, and I think that's been fine for now. So really easy. And then you can see this is a 3.4 bracket as well, and it just holds the throttle cable really nice and snug in there. So that's what we did for the throttle cable. Super simple. For the oil pressure sending unit, you must use the one off the 3.0 in order for it to work for your oil pressure gauge. So just go ahead and swap that over. It's a direct fit, and the wire fits directly onto it from the 3.4 wires. For the alternator, we went ahead and used the 3.4 alternator, 3.4 bracket, no modification needed for that. You also do have to remove the dust shield for the steering rack right here. Just go ahead and cut that, and then you should be good. But you can see right here, it clears the steering arm perfectly and fine. Also for the alternator, the power steering, and the AC, we use the stock 3.4 belts. No modification on the belts. No need to go and get different size or anything like that. Just get all the stock sizes for that. This wire right here is the alternator wire. This is from the 3.0. You don't mess with it. You leave it the way it is. On the 3.0 for their alternator, they came in 2 different versions, so you have to check your truck. The alternator plug has an oval version and a round version, so check and see which one you have. And I was lucky enough to have the oval version, and my 3.4 alternator happens to be the oval version, so it fits perfectly right into each other. Now, if you have vice versa, what you need to do is just cut the wire off the 3.4 and just splice it in here. So for example, if my 3.4 was oval and this was a round one, I will cut the wire and then splice the 3.4 oval wire onto this wire here, so vice versa. So you just have to check it out and see which plug you have. Really easy to do. Plugs right in, and then just plugs right into the hot post right here. For the starter, you can use the 3.0 or the 3.4. Keep in mind that the starter trigger plug, I found out that they were different on my engine. The 3.4 plug was different and the 3.0 plug was different. The toy only swap adapter came with a starter trigger that was made for a 3.4, so I ended up using my 3.4 starter. And then also keep in mind that for the 3.4 starter, if you do use it, both of the hose are drilled or they're threaded. So both of the hoses are threaded. And for the 3.4, what I did for the bottom ones, that I had to drill it out so the bolt can pass through and then tighten into the bell housing, and then the top bolt slides through the bell housing and then threads onto the top of the starter. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that it's really tight in those sections, so you need some small fingers or some swivels to get into those 2 screws. So have fun with that. For the battery location on the 3.0, it's originally on the passenger side. You have to move the battery to the driver's side. Really easy to do. The coolant bottle stays the same. I've seen people where they flip it around and they have it straight facing up. I found out that it stays in the same position. And then the battery fits right in front of the coolant bottle. I ended up putting a plastic piece, the battery plastic right there. And then this hole was already here, so it just drills right into, or just threads right into there. And then you have to drill 1 hole into the fender. So just mark your post and drill that. And then I also ended up getting a new piece because the original hole, right, or the original this original rod was too short. So the only thing I had to do was buy this one, and you can just go to any parts stores and just go to the battery section and buy this. So this right here goes in really quick. I have to get a bigger washer, but that's pretty much it, and it's really nice and sturdy. This is the setup that I'm gonna go with. You do have the option to go nice and fancy and get an actual battery tray and stuff like that, so that's up to you, whatever you want to spin. And also keep in mind that the hot terminal, the positive terminal, you always want the positive terminal to be on the inner side and not on the fender side, so it doesn't spark or anything like that. So make sure you have your negative over here and your positive over here. The original battery for the 3.4, these posts are actually up here, so you have positive and negative. So this one is the 3.0, and I just flip it around and have positive here, negative here, so I didn't have to buy a new battery. For the intake, we're using the 3.4. We went ahead and deleted the 2 boxes. This is a 2-inch plug, and I forgot what this size is, but you can find this from Home Depot. For this one down here, we kept the original one, but make sure you plug them up. For the box, there's 2 arms here. There's an arm right here we cut off, another arm down here we cut off. For right now, I have it loose, and I'll go ahead and decide what I want to do later, because eventually later on, I want to go ahead and do a snorkel that comes out from this fender. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the power steering, it's kind of like this. It has a curve like this. Make sure you have it as far back as possible, or else the box won't sit down flush. So that's really simple for the 3.4. And I believe the new 3.4, the newer models like the 2000 and up, they have, instead of a 1-piece tube right here, they have like a 3-piece tube. So it goes like here, and then a metal piece, and then here. So just check out and see which style you have and what setup you want to do. But really easy to do, really easy install right here for the intake box. And also make sure you replace your air filter. For the clutch on this engine, we went ahead and used the 3.4 clutch. You can use either clutch for the 3.0 or the 3.4. The 3.4 is slightly bigger, I heard, at least the flywheel is, so I just go with the 3.4. Just make it easier on yourself, and also get it brand new so everything's all new. So I went with the Ace in 3.4 clutch and a Luke flywheel. And then the throwout bearing, you must use the throwout bearing that's designed for that transmission. So in this case, we went with the 3.0 throwout bearing. The pilot bearing is the same for the 3.4 motor and the 3.0 motor. And also the rear main seal is also the same for the 3.4 and the 3.0 motor. So make sure you have all that taken care of. If you're having issue removing the pilot bearing, I made a video how to remove it really easy with just a nut and a bolt. So check out that video. I'll have a link in the description below. And also, I haven't confirmed this, but I did read online that if you do use the 3.0 flywheel and you use the 3.0 bolts, I believe the 3.0 flywheel bolts are slightly bigger on the head and you have to shave it down. So I'm not sure, but you might want to confirm that if you are going that route. Thankfully, I didn't have to worry about that because I went with the 3.4 and I went with the 3.4 bolts and stuff like that. So really easy to do, super simple. Another thing to keep in mind is that on the 3.4 clutch, it has an outer lip and it has to face inside the clutch. So make sure when you're putting that clutch in, you have it in the correct orientation. And also on the Toyota manual book, it's specified that it goes in one particular way. So even though the clutch disc says transmission side, you want to be careful with it and make sure you have it facing the right way. And the reason is because they use that clutch on multiple different engines, and in some case it does face towards the transmission side, but in this case on the 3.4 it faces inside towards the clutch. Hood clearance. The 3.4 engine is a much taller engine compared to the 3.0. There's 3 different options you can do. You can cut the brace like what I did. Keep in mind that you just need to cut this Y right here. You don't have to cut this piece. And you can see I'm already scratching a little bit, and these rub here are going to be from over here somewhere. So you can do this brace here and it closes, but you still get these rubbing. The second option is to do a body lift, and if you don't want to go crazy on the body lift, they make body lifts just for this, and it's a 3/8 inch body lift, and you can use your OEM bolts. Or you can do a hood scoop, and that requires you cutting the hood, so that's like extreme. So you can decide what you want to do. For now, I'm just gonna go with my hood brace cut off and just see where it goes. I might get some really high temp padding and put it on the hood so it doesn't rub on the engine or on the hood right here. And you can see this dent right here. This dent was from this little thing right here. And also, since it's a taller engine, get in a habit of closing your hood slightly. I know a lot of people just like to just slam on it, and I used to do that, but now what I do is I close my hood, I bring it down, and then I'll press on it and then I'll shut it tight. So get in the new habit of just closing the hood by not slamming it. One of the last thing you need to do is the exhaust, where of course the 3.4 dumps onto the passenger side. In this case, we're using it on the driver's side. So like I said, we have the crossover modifier ready. We use the 2-to-1, we use the 3.4 cat, and also the 3.4 202 sensor. So for me, I did my exhaust work, and again, I'm not finished with the exhaust at the time of recording of this video, but we have the 2-to-1, and we cut that little brace right here that I told you guys earlier. You have to cut right here. The reason why you have to cut right there, because the exhaust originally goes really flat and it doesn't clear that cross member, and you have to turn that, cut it and turn that catalytic converter slightly towards the right. You turn it this way so it can clear the cross member, and then after that you can build it out whatever way you want. So from here on you can put whatever muffler you like. And again, I'm not done with my exhaust system yet, but I'll make a new video once I complete my exhaust system, and that'll be on a separate 3.4 swap vlog. So there you have it, some information on a Toyota 3.4 swap. But here are some last minute stuff I want to give you guys. These are some of the mistakes and tips that I want to give you guys. Bump start the crank bolt if you can, because I had a really hard time removing the crank bolt when the engine was off. It was really stubborn. So make sure you use the bump start method if you can. Don't use heat on the harmonic balancer. I was using heat trying to get the bolt off. Don't use it, it's going to destroy your harmonic balancer. Install the exhaust manifold last. There's a lot of things that needs to be installed first before the exhaust manifold, such as the oil, the brand new oil union for the new dipstick hole. The 3.4 crossover, you want to install that last. I actually damaged mine because I installed it when it was still on the engine, and when I was trying to take the engine off the stand, I damaged it, and I had to send that back to John, who did my crossover. So when you're ready to do the install, go ahead and install that crossover. Install the spark plug seal correctly. I messed up on the spark plug seal. They go in one particular way, so make sure you guys check out the other videos and make sure you have them go into the valve covers. If it isn't going correctly, it won't slide into the spark plug too. Install the spark plug last. save the spark plug for last, because once the engine's on, then go ahead and install it, because if you install them now, when you're lifting up the engine with the engine hoist, you might cram into it, or the wire or the cable might cram into it. So just save the spark plug, install that last. And if you forget the cylinder pattern, it's the cylinder pattern, like I said, I listed that earlier in the video. Do all the maintenance while you can, while the engine's off. Makes it so much easier. So don't wait until that engine's on the truck, and it's gonna be more harder to reach. The other precaution you want to do is just be careful when you're lifting the engine. You want to make sure you're not kinking any cables, any wires. And also when you're removing the engines from the engine stand, lift the whole engine up with the engine stand and then unbolt the engine stand, so there's no pressure on the engine stand. I didn't do this, and I actually bent one of the bolt and I actually broke it, so I had to get a tap screw to tap the bolt out from the block of the motor, which came out really easy. So make sure you don't make the mistake that I did. Like I said earlier, mount the motor mount, driver's side motor mount first, and then install the dipstick, because the dipstick goes in between the motor mounts. So don't install the dipstick yet until you have the motor mounts installed first. When you have the 3.0 removed and the engine's clean and stuff like that, you can go ahead and remove the dust shield on the steering arm. I mentioned that earlier. There's a heat shield right on the kick panel of like where the clutch pedal is. Go ahead and camera that back towards the kick panel. And then there's a heat shield on the inside of the rail near the torsion bar on the driver's side. You want to go ahead and remove that. It's held by 3 bolts. I didn't remove it, and I ended up using a sawzall, hammering it, and had to cut it into pieces for it to come out when I had the 3.4 motor already installed in the engine. So make sure you do that. I mentioned this earlier, the 4x4 switch and the reverse switch, I cut it too short, so I cut like 6 inches off. So make sure you cut about at least 2 feet of pigtails for the 4x4 and the reverse switch on the 3.0, because that will tap onto the 3.4 wire harness as well. When I got the 3.4 started, I was getting issues bleeding the system, so I went and bought the proper funnel to bleed the system, and it finally worked. So make sure when you're doing or the first startup, get the proper funnel and bleed the coolant system properly, or else you're gonna have issues like me. I mentioned this earlier as well, the power steering bolt, make sure that's fully tightened. You have to really go hard on that. I believe this torque spec was like 80 foot-pound or something like that, but make sure you guys check that out. This is unconfirmed, so make sure it's really tight, because I was having a leaking issue and I thought that my power steering was going out, but luckily it was just the bolt and it wasn't tight enough. When you're installing the 3.4 motor, it really helps to have at least 3 people on site. One person controlling the hoist, one person controlling on each side of the engine, just wiggling it in. It was just me and my buddy Rodolfo, and we were able to get in, but at the most part 3 people is ideally. 2 people at least. If you're just doing it by yourself, you're gonna have a really hard time aligning that 3.4 into the tranny. And also when you're doing that, you want to slightly jack up the transmission up a little bit so that it's up and the engine will slide in. So just figure out and play with it. Don't rush, take your time. And we also did end up removing the front tires of the truck to lower even more, because the engine hoist was maxed out when lifting up and down, etc, etc. So just make sure you watch out for that. Well, that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this Toyota 3.4 swap guide. If you guys got any questions, or if you guys think that I missed out on anything, let me know in the comment section and I'll go ahead and add it to the video description. And again, if you guys want to download this PDF right here, I'll have this link in my description as well, and you guys can download this. You guys can take notes. It's free, and just use this for your next swap. And again, this is just for my particular swap from my 4Runner 97 to my Toyota pickup. If you're doing a 22 RE automatic, yours is going to be slightly different, but for the most part everything is pretty much similar. This is my first time doing this 3.4 swap or any engine swap, and I gotta say this swap here was fairly easy. Most of the hard thing is just the labor intensive, pulling out the motor, being a small guy like me, but for the most part it's really easy and it's really fun. I'm really glad that I did it myself, because now I know a lot about this motor. If something breaks, something goes wrong, I know where things are and how to put things back together. So I highly recommend you guys tackle this swap and have fun doing it, man. This has been a super fun project for the last 2 months, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. And again, I'll see you guys next time. Talk to you guys then. Bye bye.